I'm trying to stay away from that. And kid you not, I lived off of Lunchables and Malta. That and deli sandwiches the first like 6 weeks after I gave birth. Now I melted the weight off pretty fast and I felt like I was looking good. Okay, but there were so many it just wasn't enough. Nothing was good enough. And then I was so tired. Adriana was particularly clingy. There's absolutely nobody who can tell me that it was not because of the week that she spent under lights in the NICU away from me. Yes, I was by her bedside the entire time, but it didn't. I think that she still had like abandonment issues. And so whenever I put her down, God, would she scream. And she just screamed. And I'm like, how am I supposed to love this thing that would never shut up? I couldn't sleep when she slept because it seemed like she never slept. The entire time I was struggling to make sure that she was good and make sure that I was doing things right. And, everything online tells you that you're not supposed to sleep with your baby. But so I was exhausted from, and cluster feeding. Oh God, nobody explained cluster feeding to me where they just eat and eat and eat. And at this point, my nipples were actually bleeding. They were sore because I was doing everything possible to pop them out so that way she would have an easy target to eat. My first couple of weeks with Adriana were so hard and I didn't have anybody to come to about it. It didn't feel like I was in good terms with my mom, not enough for me to say that to her. I didn't really have enough female figures in my life that I felt like I could go to. I didn't have any friends because I had just come home from the service and the only friend that I did have didn't have kids. I had never been more alone and it didn't feel like I could talk to her father about it because, he was kind of just like, it's not that hard, you got this. And I just felt like a raging ball of emotions that would never stop. We are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I will go ahead and explain what my first weeks with Adriana were really like as far as what I was feeling. All right. I hope everybody enjoyed their little break. So, my first few weeks after I gave birth. So, I already spoke about what I ate, what my diet was like. And I was at this point where I guess I was coming to terms with the fact that my relationship with my kid's dad wouldn't work out. Had I known how it would have worked out, like the fact that we have 2 more children after Adriana, maybe I wouldn't have stressed as much, but it definitely gave me this feeling of I'm not good enough. And so I still was struggling to civilian lifestyle, which is more so like after I came home from the service, you're not surrounded by soldiers anymore. It's this heady feeling when you're in there. It's like you get up at 4:30 in the morning. Everybody's wearing the same thing. Everybody's going through the same kind of special hell. Everybody's going to eat the same breakfast. Everybody's got to get up and work out and get dressed and get ready. Your day is going to pretty much be the same if you're with people who are in your same MOS, which is your same job. And then you all have dinner at the same time. You'll have lunch at the same time. And after, the only thing that's pretty much as different is when you get out and you're, hanging around the barracks. But even then, it's pretty much all the same shit because if you're living in the barracks, you're not really doing anything like exciting. So then I come home and nobody's doing the same thing. Everybody's on different clocks. Everybody's on different waves. Everybody's on different waves. Please ignore like my background noise. So I sit there and I'm trying to figure out what my life is now, and then throw a baby on top of that, a baby that I couldn't read. God, she was screaming all the time. And I was not in a stable environment. I was moving back and forth because me and my mom would get into these arguments. And I just felt like, God, my mom and my kid's dad didn't really get along, like at all. And that's like a whole nother backstory. But it just wasn't, they didn't get along. So the idea of him coming over to her house to see me and his daughter, it was like, oh, that's definitely out of the question, because my mom was going to be all up in my business and then it was going to turn into a fight. And I just didn't want that. At that time, I wasn't as situated as an adult as I am now. I felt like maybe I was still low-key a kid. And that created a whole host of issues on its own. But I still didn't feel anything as a parent. And that scared me. It wasn't until about 5 weeks in where I was sleeping over at his house, and she had this like Mama-Roo thing. And so she was sleeping in it. And then of course she woke up. She was sleeping in it for maybe like 10, 15 minutes and she woke up. So I picked her up and I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to sit up in bed and I'm going to breastfeed her. That's it. This was before I discovered the joys of breast sleeping, by the way, which I will explain in a minute. I had her on top of me towards, like, not towards the outside of the bed where she could fall, towards the inside. And I had her cradled and I was breastfeeding her. And then, I heard her. She had kind of like a mini shit explosion. So I'm like, okay, it's time to change her. I felt like I had been awake forever. Because then during the day he would go to work and I would stay inside and I would stay confined to the room watching reruns or watching what was I watching? Was I watching Bones at the time? No, I might have finished Bones. Actually, I was watching Golden Girls. So I would rewatch Golden Girls, which, unfortunately to say right now, that moment in time, for the past 6 years, my TV life has been watching reruns of shows that I have already watched. That's exactly what I've been doing. I really wish I hadn't done that at the moment because I really set a precedent. But I was watching Golden Girls and I was maybe playing video games if I could get into a comfortable position. And she was, oh God, she had the worst colic. And sometimes she would cry for like 2.5 hours. And I would panic because I'm sitting there rocking her and holding her. She wouldn't stop crying. Her dad was at work, so I was doing all this alone. And while I'm sitting there holding her, I hear that she poops on herself. So I go to change her. Now, the bed at the time was a platform bed. It was maybe, when you're sitting on top of it, maybe 2 feet off the floor, if that. And there was carpet on the floor. So I'm sitting there and I'm changing her. And I swear to God, I dozed off for a second. And what woke me up was the sound of her hitting the diaper bag and then rolling onto the floor. And I'll never forget that moment. Instantly, her father woke up like he was rising out of the dead. And he just yelled, "No!" And that snapped me out of it. And I heard her and she was curled up like a little Cheeto on the floor. No damage at all. She had literally gone like 6 inches, hit the soft diaper bag, rolled off the rest of the 6 inches onto the floor. Something you need to know about newborns, they're extremely resilient. Also, maybe less, like a fraction, 0.05% of parents can say that they've never dropped their kid. Just saying. It's a thing. Ask any seasoned parent. I didn't per se drop her, but she did fall on my watch. She rolled off the bed, rolled off of a surface. My fault. At that moment, I had never been more awake. I picked her up and I was searching her body for some sort of, I'm like, oh my God, she's broken on the inside. There's internal bleeding. Mind you, I was a nurse. Oh my God, there's internal bleeding now. I know that babies are super flexible. I worked in L&D. I know that they have like 300 and something bones on their body before they all mold into bigger bones, and they don't even have kneecaps. But I was sitting here looking for all of the internal bleeding and all of the signs that she was dying. I am extremely grateful for what her dad told me after we, revised her, made sure that she was good. He told me, he was like, Angie, it's not a big deal. The kids fall. She's okay. She's fine. It was like 5 o'clock in the morning. And I was distraught. Okay? Even after he assured me The feelings of failure as a mother were just, they had been contained up until that point, but from there they started branching. They started branching and it was awful. I cried for hours. I stopped after he told me to stop, and the second he left for work, I kept crying. I kept crying, and I was sitting there apologizing to her. Mind you, she probably did not remember it. She guaranteed didn't remember it. She was perfectly fine sitting there drinking her milk. She was totally okay. And I was beating myself the fuck up for God knows how long for the rest of the day because I dropped her. And I thought, like, literally, I made the farthest leap ever. I was like, oh my God, she's going to become a stripper now. She's going to have like super issues with, all the things in the world. She's going to be a failure and a burger flipper because I dropped her. Those feelings did not go away. They built. They kept going. And with every single day that passed that I wasn't doing something with my life, and even when I was doing something with my life, when I felt like life for her wasn't where I wanted it to be, that depression took over. I wasn't eating how I should. I couldn't drink because I was breastfeeding. Couldn't smoke weed because I was breastfeeding. And I wasn't even a smoker. I couldn't do anything. And so I couldn't read a book for an outlet. I couldn't do anything because then on top of that, like I said, 4 or 5 months after her being born, I went back to school. And so then I was also juggling school and juggling who was going to watch her while I was in school. It got to the point where I would have my dad come to my school and watch her outside in the hallway while I, got my education on, and I would just step out to feed her because also I sucked pumping milk as a mother. I really did. I have all the breast milk in the world and it just doesn't come out. Maybe I just haven't found the right machine yet, but I've definitely tried quite a few and it didn't work for me. So everything had to be straight fed. It made it impossible for anybody to watch her. I started growing resentment that I didn't have people in my life who wanted to watch her because I needed a break. I needed a break. I didn't feel like a woman anymore. I barely felt like one before I gave birth. And then I was so young. None of it seemed to quell together well. So I was panicking, and the depression did not go away for the life of me. It did not go away. So I don't know how to explain it because I don't know if ever it was really cured. I ended up going to see my physician at the VA. They did like that little depression screening, and then there was concerns that I might have had PTSD, but it was very hard to diagnose because I was experiencing symptoms of PTSD and I'd also just had a baby. So it was very hard to distinguish which symptoms were for one, which one was for the other. Because the depression never went away, I then ended up finding out that I was pregnant with Jamila Adriana was maybe about like 10, 11 months. And a new special sort of hell set in at that point, and the depression just continued. Now, at a certain point, if I have to look back and be honest with myself, I think that, I don't want to say it was cured, but my depression did ease up. As far as postpartum depression goes, it eased up maybe 6 or 7 months after she was born. But I can't say with certainty because I know that I was still experiencing depression then. I just don't know what kind it was. But that feeling, you know what? I'm lying to you guys. I was depressed. Postpartum depression, as far as that goes, maybe about the time that I started school again would be around the time that I said that, or that I felt like I was in tune enough with my child that I was like, okay, this is whatever depression I'm experiencing. It's not related to